know it seems like I'm off the rails today because I'm not talking specifically about education or immigration or health care, but this is the kind of show that makes you understand the news and understand what's coming. There is another attack coming now on me, and I'm not responding to the attack. I have to tell you the truth, but I want you to know what the truth is from me first. Because I have yet another a close Obama advisor. First it was Van Jones that started a campaign against me, and now it's a new one, Reverend Jim Wallace, starting a campaign against me. Man, what are the odds that Barack Obama would not have anything to do with that, which I'm sure he doesn't. So here is Reverend Jim Wallace. Let me introduce you to Jim Wallace, because he's very influential. He is the spiritual advisor to the President of the United States. That's a bad photo of him. He consults on policy, however. That's weird. I mean, would you want your priest writing policy for the government? Would anybody say, hey, George Bush got his pastor up there right now? That's not good. Isn't that everything the left says they're against? Why are they suddenly for it now? Well, because this guy has really very little to do with religion and everything to do with power. Faith, hope, and charity. I believe wholeheartedly in taking care of the poor. I've made a practice in my personal life to devote a certain percentage of my gross income to doing that. Jim Wallace, yet another spiritual advisor to the President of the United States, a guy who believes a lot of the stuff that Jeremiah Wright does. He is a blatant redistribution of wealth advocate, a Marxist. But I don't want you to take my word for it. We have years and years and years of words of Mr. Wallace. Let's take his words for it.
Are you then calling for the redistribution of wealth in society?
Absolutely, without any hesitation. That's what the gospel is all about.
The redistribution of wealth is what the gospel is all about. He claims that the gospel of Jesus Christ is about a central government taking money from individuals and then distributing it the way they see fit. Christians, you know better than that. You know better than that. Reverend Wallace, we know who's distorting the gospel here. We know that Jesus' message was about choice. And if you're going to a church that has social justice, which means I choose with my church to go out and make a difference, that's a different thing than what you're preaching. You have a responsibility. If you have extra, the Lord does say you have a responsibility to choose to help the poor. You remember what he said about the rich people? They'll have a harder time getting into heaven than a camel going through the needle of or the eye of a needle. You see, he is the arbiter of justice. I already told you that the Reverend says, quote, voluntary faith-based initiatives with no resources to make any serious difference in poverty reduction is not adequate. Okay, so now there's the distortion again, a perversion of the Bible. Are you really going to try to convince Americans that they should be forced into giving? And by the way, if you are forced, is that giving? Do you feel charitable on April 15th? Because I don't. I don't. I feel charitable when I write a check for tithing, when I write a check for the poor or send somebody to school. That I do feel charitable then. Not on April 15th. When did Christ ever preach about taking away our free will? You see, at least my understanding here, Reverend, is that's the other side's plan. Forcing people to do the right thing. That's the devil's way. That's the Marxist, communist, socialist, progressive way. That is the kind of social justice they speak of. Not me. Oh, there's more. More on Reverend Wallace and his perversion of the gospel and what this means to you. What's coming? Coming up. You know, this is, you're an amazing audience. You watch this show differently than you watch any other show that I think maybe even in the history of television. Last night, I think we had like 3.5 million people watching us. There's a lot of people that are watching at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I appreciate that. But I ask you to get one more friend into the lifeboat. I don't even, if you can get them to watch the show, great. I need you to pass this information on to them. And if they say something about Glenn Beck, just say this question, and you'll understand it at the end of this block. Ask them this one question. But what if he's right? He's not right. No, no, no. Answer the question. if he's right? If he's wrong, I'll admit it. I'll sing it from the rooftop. But what if he's right? Does it matter? Tonight I'm talking to you about social justice, and you'll understand it in the coming days why this is really important. This, if you missed it at the top of the show, this is why it's really important. You need to be a person who becomes familiar with this, and one person you need to be familiar with is Reverend Jim Wallace. He's the new spiritual advisor to the president, policy advisor too. It's kind of a spooky little pact, I think, going on there. When Jesus spoke of the widow's mite and how blessed she was, Jesus noted that she gave her all. She gave her all. It wasn't taken from her. If it would have been, it would have completely defeated her act. If Jesus would have walked up and taken the widow's mite, what difference does it make to her? That's the point he was making. She gave her all. But here's some more Bible news from the good Reverend, Barack Obama's new advisor on the Bible. Watch this.
There are 2,500 verses in the King James Bible about poor people. One time in seminary, we cut out of the Bible every reference to poor people. Every single one. Took us a long, long time. When we were done, that Bible was in shreds. It was falling apart. It was literally in holes, a Bible full of holes. I would take it out with me to preach. I'd say, brothers and sisters, this is the American Bible. It's full of holes.
First of all, let me just say this. It's not the American Bible. I don't know if he knows this. It wasn't written or compiled or bound together by Americans. Second, I'll take his word that there are 2,500 references to the poor. Absolutely. I mean, I haven't counted. I'm surprised there are that few. Wouldn't surprise me that there were more. But his point is, how many references are there to the poor? Now, let me ask you this. How many references to the government being responsible to take care of them? Zero. None. You see, the reason why Jesus was crucified is because they thought he was a king. Oh, here's your king. No, no, no. He was a king of another world. His kingdom is inside of us. That's what he was worried about, not this. How many references to the fact that Caesar or anybody else should take the money from the wealthy and distribute it to the poor in Galilee? You'd think if Jesus was preaching that, he would have been more clear. Hey, wow, we should picket. We should go march in front of Pontius Pilate. That might hack him off, though. No. This is a complete perversion of the gospel to try to jam it into Marxism or communism and rot us from the inside. There is not one example of that system of government providing a decent lives for their people. Not one. Show that government to me. This is the social justice they speak of. Social justice. Surely the president couldn't have yet another Marxist for a spiritual advisor. Didn't he just leave one? And then he couldn't go to church. He didn't go to church. But he's preaching to us about morals. He doesn't go to church. Why? Are there no Marxist churches in Washington? I'm sure you could find one. Reverend Wallace told the story a couple of years ago about the time he met, apparently Marxists know this person, I never heard of her, the Marxist Dorothy Day. Listen to this.
My Dorothy Day story happened in Chicago. She was just leaving as we were coming on the scene. So we were living in Chicago.
Chicago?
So I ran, 20 blocks, and I'm in the parlor of the Catholic Worker, and in walks the great lady. Dorothy wrote a book about her life called Love is the Measure. But she wasn't ever soft, very tough.
So was Stalin.
So, you're a radical student like me, right? Yeah. You were a Marxist like me, right? Yeah.
So how does Reverend Wallace explain all of this to Barack Obama? I don't think he has to. They're on the exact same Spread the Wealth page.
It's not that I want to punish your success. I just want to make sure that everybody who is behind you, that they've got a chance at success too. Everybody's so pinched that business is bad for everybody. And I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody.
Okay,